Welcome, dear students. The current session is about why and how to study English language through division in stages. Well, I hope and expect by the end of this session, you would be able to have an understanding of why and how it is significant to study the English language through division in different stages. In order to think about this topic and to talk about it, the first question that we need to consider is, why should the history of English be studied? So, at the outset, determining the significance of the study of history of English language itself is important. Well, I think with even the very little knowledge that one can have about how English has evolved through the times, how phonologically, semantically, syntactically, how in all these ways it has developed through centuries. It has developed from Old English times to the modern times through different, phases. This even very little knowledge would help us understand how important it is to study, the history of English language. Because no matter how much we synchronically look at language at this time point, how it is in the current world today, this would not be enough to understand the nature of English language. Though this synchronic aspect can be a kind of supportive, perspective for looking at it diachronically, but mainly we need to look at it from the historical or what is called diachronic perspective. And why we need to do this? English, with all its vagaries and inconsistencies, remains the single most important and most influential language of the world today. Throughout history, it has repeatedly found itself in the right place at the right time. English-speaking Britain was the leading colonial nation during the 17th century as well as during the 18th century. And in fact, the 18th century revolution can rightly be related to, this English context. In the late 19th and 20th century, English-speaking America emerged as a leader in the economy. And this leadership in the economy, of course, brought a lot of power with it. It was also at the forefront of the electronic and digital revolution of the late 20th century. So this role of America, again, brought to English a lot of power, a lot of significance. Anyways, the English language has proved itself the most flexible and the most resilient of all the languages, remarkable for its ability to adopt and to absorb vocabulary from other languages and to adapt itself to the needs of the people. Its continued vitality is evidenced by the number and diversity of its worldwide variations today. From one part of the world to the other, as you travel, you might see the change and the shift in the varieties of English, but English is currently being used all across the globe. Deciding about the study of, English language from the historical perspective, there are further questions that we need to consider. One question is, why should English be studied in division of stages? And the second, how should the divisions be made? Well, why should English be studied in division of stages? To answer this part, I would firstly say that the history of English language is a long period, quite a long period that covers, centuries after centuries. To study the progress and the development and the changes that have taken place in the language, probably it is a good idea to break it into parts and, to look at the characteristics of each of the divisions. Secondly, why it is significant and why it should be done, because by breaking the whole period of the existence of English language into divisions or in periods would help us differentiate one period or one division from the other period or from the other division. Thus, it would help us, kind of have a comparison or a contrast of what we call the characteristics of language. We can see what were the major features or what were the major elements of the language of a particular division or a particular time period, and how they were similar or different from the other one. This division would also be helpful in the sense because it would allow not only the internal comparisons of one period with the other period, for example, the Old English period with the Modern English period, or the Modern English period with the Middle English period, etc., but also there would be a possibility of external, comparisons with other languages during, their characteristics at different time points in the development of those languages through history.